Okay, our third speaker, Jennifer Daniel, is a designer, author, and illustrator who until recently was a graphics editor at the New York Times. Originally hailing from Kansas, these days she spends her time in San Francisco as a creative director at Google, working on ways to use machine learning as a means of self-expression for communication products like Allo, Duo, and Google Photos. In 2015, she published a picture book called Space, as an exclamation point. As an exploration of science through information graphics, her new book, The Origin of Almost Everything, a collaboration with New Scientist editor Graham Lawton, came out this past September and aims to unravel dozens of life's biggest mysteries. Please welcome Jennifer Daniel.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to have an excuse to leave the States. So I don't want to be here. It's not that I don't want to be in Montreal. Montreal's lovely. I find French language to be very intimidating, though. I tried asking a cab driver to bring me to where I'm staying, and I butchered the street name so bad. He looked at me like I had asked him for a tampon. Do you know what I mean? Like he had no idea what I was talking about, and he looked concerned but also confused. And so I just showed him my phone, and that's how I got to where I was. The reason I don't want to be here is because this talk has really forced me to take the time and to confront what it's like to be a white woman in America. And I'm here with the unique opportunity to talk to an auditorium full of white designers. And you white people know what I'm talking about, that despite being white, we too have been marginalized, and we too have been oppressed. I was bullied when I was little because I had a speech impediment. And I was raised in the Midwest, and I told boys I was Jewish, and they told me I was exotic. But I was raised Jewish in the Midwest, and I also got sent letters telling me to convert to Christianity. I've never worked for a woman before. And I have to fight infinitely harder for the same promotions and salaries as my male peers. I'm a working mother, and that is a total shit show. Did I mention I was exotic? I'm like 1/8 Native American. But I am privileged. And framing my life as anything other than being extremely charmed is kind of dishonest. I mean, I might feel like an outsider in my community, but to Americans, I am the majority, and that with that comes a bias that I'm often not aware of. I try to be cognizant of this because with privilege comes comfort, and I love to be comfortable, but one could be oppressed and an oppressor at the same time, and that privilege is not an either-or idea. When someone spends a lifetime experiencing privilege, they take it for granted and can grow to feel a sense of entitlement. And they're likely tempted to conflate the struggles or challenges of being oppressed. But more importantly, a lot of people start genuinely feeling oppressed. So I am here to challenge the designer's favorite personal narrative, that I am a self-made woman. That because of my hard work and my vision, I am standing on stage right now. There's nothing that white people like to do more than quote MLK out of context. But I think it kind of works here. We've all read the Medium posts, we've listened to inspirational talks, that all it takes is dedication and that hustle, and you too can be successful, but that is a total mirage. Instead, in reality, there are circumstances that have enabled me to get where I'm at. I mean, why am I even here speaking tonight? It's because I've spoken at other conferences. And why was I invited to those? Because I critique design culture on Twitter. And why can I freely critique design culture on Twitter? Because I have no fear of consequence. And why do I not fear consequence? Because I've never had to. And and is it because I'm secure? And where does that security come from? Is it because of my social class? Probably. And what I do know is that it is fact. It is easier for me to do things that are harder for others. Now that the reality TV show star is now president, I never want to hear about a meritocracy ever again in our industry. Doesn't belong there. So despite believing that I am a progressive liberal aware of multiple worldviews, I am closed in my own way, unaware of other people's experiences. The protests this weekend were awesome. Who knew we could revive the sign painting movement with a little social media? As women marched on Washington and all over the world, I could feel how powerful it was. It's almost like we had to remind ourselves that we are fucking here, and we are not powerless, and this is just the start. Despite the warning calls of Brexit and the Republican primary, I was honestly shocked by the election results in November. Meanwhile, everyone else who actually experiences racism, they were all like, I told you so. What the outcome of the American election exposed for me was not entirely new for marginalized folks. After the election, a friend of mine DM'd me and said, most people of color don't live in a bubble. We can't afford to, but many white people do. I didn't really understand what she meant, but I'm starting to now. Designers take a hard look at, well, America, and I mean, this might be easier for folks who are from Canada, but from America, it's really hard to acknowledge that it isn't what it claims to be. That it is a racist country, that 52% of white women voted for Trump. The symptoms are there, that Black Lives Matter needs to be taken seriously, that the experiences of gay, trans, people of color are not merely the results of misunderstandings. It's easy to dismiss burning crosses because they seem really extreme, but the real enemy claims to be on your side going, I agree with you, but not with your tactics. And they shove oppression on the rug, even under the banner of liberalism, and that's a really hard one to address. Liberals suck at staying on message. It's part of that whole like all views are welcome banner that we all stand under. Intersectionality is actually very hard. We can't even agree if hitting Nazis is okay. I mean, to be fair, this is like a relatively new question for our generation, and Hitler was a vegetarian, so like maybe. Additionally, white American liberals have deliberately separated themselves from their conservative family and friends. So why are we so surprised at all the shit that went down? Is it because we've walled ourselves off from the reality of racism in our own families? How many times have I heard my friends and even my family said, I hate Facebook because of the racism that exists on there? But like, those racists are your aunts, your uncles, your moms, your brothers, your dads. I need to recognize and remind myself and other white women that our families put a beauty pageant owner into office. And I can't do this if I block them on Facebook. And my brother valiantly also responds to them on Facebook. They remain unblocked even when they call my 2-year-old son a tranny. It's okay, I don't care. My son really doesn't care, so if that matters. Not every person who voted Trump is racist, but they didn't vote for him for his compassion, right? Voters had lots of reasons. They either really hated Hillary, they're super pro-life, they're anti-gay marriage, some voted for him for reservation. Not everyone who voted Trump, but everyone who did vote for Trump was able to rationalize his misogyny and his fragile baby ego for some other reason. And a lot of those people were white. White people love saying, not all white people, or not all men. White American liberals want badly not to be associated with the rest of whiteness. There's nothing people hate more than when they're lumped in as a group of people. But, surprise, white Americans do that to marginalized groups of people all the time and seem to have no problem with it. So we have to stop acting so surprised that Trump is president. Just let yourself be angry and get to work. So a lot of people feel very confused. What can you do? What can I do as a citizen? What can I do as a designer? What can I do as a human being? So what is good? Is good Meryl Streep's award show speech about how Hollywood slays and Trump blows? Is it posting that speech on Twitter and saying, yeah, queen? Is it Teen Vogue? Is it protesting? Is it a business card? Is it flying to Montreal and giving a talk? Is it redesigning Trump's logo Spoiler, it's not. I know designers can't help themselves, but aesthetics are no replacement for ethics, and good design has virtually nothing to offer the social sphere. Do designers, especially American designers, ever do good things for any reason besides burnishing their own brand? Does design have repercussions for your immortal soul? How can the world be so bad if there is so much speaking out on social media? There's so many enamel pins with pithy Trump turd designs and hand-lettered protest posters. The impulse and the pressure to be good immediately and all the time is becoming a problem. In a liberal world, our impulses to be good lends itself to a very specific self-deception on which late capitalism thrives. In the strictest of definitions, if I was really good, would I be a designer? Shouldn't I be helping to resettle Syrian refugees without the expectation of promoting my brand? But within capitalism, it sometimes takes very little to be deemed good. Designers want to change the world by disrupting the hotel lobby, shout out, staying in an Airbnb, by delivering your groceries faster, by heating your food better. Facebook wants you experience empathy by hanging out with your family or looking at someone in Syria in VR up close, because you're so close to the humanity. But that's not compassion. That's not even empathy. That's just the male gaze. It's just another excuse to put tech between us and people. And so design liberalism could be about being good, to be tolerant, to be progressive, to be loud, to be positive. And yet it's closer aligned to monetizing things that don't need to be economized. Feminism, education, incarceration, and even, yes, diversity. We don't want to look deeper into the problems of these movements and social services, otherwise they may reveal their ugly dollar-driven flaws. I get it. Confronting the new presidency, a Senate majority, the House majority, the Supreme Court nominations, it's only natural that we are trying to cope with feelings of hopelessness by trying to take control of the situation. But instead of interrogating that hopelessness, accepting that we discounted how scary progress can be for people, and confronting issues that are hard to understand and threatening, I'm listening to designers talk about how they're donating the profits of their designer shirts and designer spoons to some legitimately important progressive organizations, because that's the only way designers know how to connect to other people, by buying and selling shit. And surprise, it's useless and ineffectual. The feel-good stuff only goes so far. In short, designers who are taking the election and making it about personal creativity can fuck off. I can see if you don't experience racism, it is hard to understand that America is actually that racist, but the answer isn't to isolate yourself more into these safe spaces and to send PayPal checks to one another. It is not to promote your personal brand. Whiteness has been prioritizing race privilege over solidarity with women of color. We got into this mess because everyone groups themselves by likeness instead of differences. It's easy to throw design at the problem because the mandate is much clearer. Where we actually stand is much murkier. In a way, for many of Trump's election is their first large-scale encounter with any semblance of badness, and our design culture does not really know what engaging with that looks like. We prefer to tell each other how wonderful we are and that we did a great job. So in the short term, we have sought to resolve our discomfort with capitalism. Discomfort is our ruling body now. Any form of engagement will only be worthwhile if there's also recognition of the tensions, the good, the bad, and the in-between, because that is now what governs us. Oops, is that it? Yeah. Sorry. America's Goo Goo design community is completely out of touch with the worldviews outside of their own. November 8th, 2016, I scrolled through my timeline reading tweets from design leaders questioning why people were so hopeless and angry and pointing to the election as a reason to create safe spaces for creativity. Listen, the solution is not to dismiss others' feelings and to create more echo chambers. Stop unfriending people who disagree with you and challenge your personal narrative. That's how we got into this mess. You make stuff for people who don't look like you, who don't have that beautiful manicured beard and mustache. It's imperative to broaden your own worldview as a designer and as a human. So I hear a lot from conference organizers that they want, quote, more black people. but are unable to articulate why, other than a diversity thing is something well-intentioned white people do, and that's something they're supposed to be concerned with. So many people want a reason to care about diversity, but in reality, those folks are pursuing just more capitalism, not compassion. And then there are other people who defend the results of design competitions by repeating the mantra, as long as the work is good, the competition is fair. This is what everyone says, but that's where the bias lies. It's not nefarious, it's not an organized effort. Design by its nature is subjective, and aesthetics are defined by race and culture and class, which creates more zones of exclusion without consciously trying. So of course this bias exists in design competitions, and we shouldn't be so surprised when the judges look like the winners. It's simply amplified in our concentrated environment of graphic design. Diversity in other cases can breed tokenism, and I am just as guilty of that as other people. So I have this friend, Robin, who is trans, and we talk about the potential violence that she faces when people gawk at her and how she doesn't want to die when she uses, quote, the wrong bathroom and when she needs to pee, and how frustrating it is when people misgender her on the phone, and how she didn't choose to be trans, and how the fact that she is trans is the least interesting thing about her. And one day, she was venting to me about someone who was in a position of power who kept asking her, as a token trans person, to give them a pass for their own misguided transphobia. And as she was talking, I realized that I had made her my token trans friend. And I was horrified. And I forced myself not to just ping her when I needed consultation on pronoun use. And it took effort, but I had categorized her in such a way that I had to expand that. And now we talk about everything. We talk about shopping and graphic design, which is mostly boring, and the band Not a Surf. And our friendship has gotten that much deeper because of it. But it wasn't until I moved to San Francisco that I was really confronted with my place in society. San Francisco is a horrible, terrible city. It's a funny joke that we make San Francisco seem like a fancy place with fancy toast, but in reality, it's falling apart. And sometimes I wonder if San Francisco is that canary in the coal mine, as the disparity between the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich continues to get wider and wider in America. Living in San Francisco has made me far more aware of my privilege in a way that living in New York never did. I moved from one of the most diverse cities in America to the whitest. San Francisco is full of white male elites, and without people who identify as a minority occupying positions of power and decision-making, the future that San Francisco is supposedly making will only continue to get more white. And now, I look around here, and I see a lot of white people, and I see a lot of women, which is awesome, but I've never worked for a woman before, and that's crazy. I've been working in pizza parlors and bookstores since I was 15. Now I'm 34 and I've only worked for men. Granted, they're really great men, but I've never worked for someone that is 50% of our population. So this is also not about optics. This is about designing for everyone, right? So if you need a reason to care about diversity still, Snapchat is a prime example for subtly enforcing white superiority. Katie Zhu, who's the designer at Medium, wrote a piece about this, and so have others, about how a lot of the lenses on Snapchat whitewash user skins, and other filters are a little less subtle. So it should come as no surprise that everybody who's in a position of power at Snapchat is a white man. Even last fall, Apple did a demo in Chinese with a white woman. We all know Trump will be more preoccupied with being able to declare success than with actually succeeding. And if that doesn't remind you of when product designers celebrate the launch of a product, regardless if it's a good product, then I can't help you. As an illustrator, I'm not surprised to see Trump's image everywhere, but it's really ironic given that he's cutting the NEA, and many other artists will be assigned to draw his portrait for news and magazine clients. And it doesn't matter how subversive or how neutral or how beautiful he is depicted, each image normalizes him, his legacy empowered.
So a reporter for Time magazine, and I have been on their cover 14 or 15 times. I think we have the all-time record in the history of Time magazine.
all those images. So what we need to going forward is to address the bias in the creative industries by acknowledging our own biases. Lacking perspective is hard because you lack perspective. So start by listening to people that don't tell you what you want to hear. Are you faving tweets that exclusively include avatars of people who look like you? Do the folks reassuring that you were right when other people are disagreeing with you have anything to lose? Okay, I realize I have spoken for a long time and have not offered any tactical advice. We're designers, we're naturally tactical. I remember when everyone was talking about how Facebook needed to create a new algorithm to solve this problem. Fuck your algorithm, Facebook. That's not how you approach this problem. I'm also not gonna tell you to volunteer. You know when people say I volunteered, it frequently gets followed by a feeling of, great, I could put that to rest. Designers supposedly love to hustle. I hate the word, but the design industry loves it. So how are you gonna hustle about issues a little closer to home? How over the next 4 years are you going to commit to understanding our own biases within the spaces that we work every day? Getting folks who think differently than you is half the job, and the real work starts once they're hired. You bridge the gaps within your hiring process to give more access and making creative opportunities available to all and not a select few. It's pushing back against clients who demand white photo stock imagery be used. It's moving towards gathering new insights and culture. It's being cognizant of the language at all times and not dismissing racial remarks as someone's way or office banter. It's us, white people, not folks who are suffering from our privilege, that need to start talking and spreading this knowledge. Also them too, but really important that we do it as well. Be generous to your peers, especially with your knowledge and your ideas and your resources. Today has presented us with a really renewed opportunity to discuss privilege, power, inclusion, continue to find places outside of design to do good rather than think of design as a force for good. The industry has a lot of inequalities. Realize that we have the power to be truly representative and provide real change. What politics have to do with the design industry is a wide and varied discussion that we'll be having for a long time. But nothing has forced me to reckon with what is important to me more than talking to people who disagree with me. I would challenge all of you to talk to people who challenge you. People who don't look like you, people who don't think like you, people who make you angry, people who make you confused. It's really hard, but you should try. For me, that means writing personal letters to my Trump-leaning relatives. And for you, I'm not sure what it is, but you'll figure it out. So thank you.